Can you get a car for 200 bucks? Well, this guy did, and it's a Grand Marquis. And not only is it a Grand Marquis, it's the ultimate edition Grand Marquis. And the interesting part of the story is this. Basically, he paid 200 bucks because the guy had new tires, so he basically paid for the tires. The previous owner was going to donate the car. He said, no, I got a 2-year-old kid. This is a safe car. I'll give you 200 bucks for it. Now, yes, right after he bought it, he had to put an alternator and a battery in it, but really, these V8 Ford engines can last forever. He bought it with 140, and now it has 176,000 miles on it. It even came with the obligatory Little Trees air freshener. Armrest is worse for wear, but the leather in the back's still in really good shape. And as everyone knows, they got the monster trunk in these things. You can fit lots of things inside here. Back in the day when all cars had full-size spares and not those stupid run flat tires that make noise, or the baby spare tires, or even worse, the cheaply made modern cars that don't even have spare tires. They're dependable. You get a flat, you put it on, away you go. You don't have to worry about, oh, I got the skinny little tire and I can't drive right now. No, bring back the olden days. And you might say, what, a gas hog? Hey, this thing gets 22 miles a gallon on the highway. Now, the safety factor was a big reason he bought this car for a whopping $200. Got the rear-facing child seat. This thing is safe because it's big and heavy, and yes, it's from Massachusetts, so it's got the rust that people have covered up. Well, you're going to expect that. Now, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. 200 bucks isn't much for a car, but if you're looking at one, what you really care about is the frame. See how solid that frame is? We don't care that the fender has a little rot in it. The frame is still solid. These Panther bodies, they are solid bodies. They can run a really long time. That's the difference between these old cars and the new cars. The new cars, almost every single one of them, is unibody. The body, the frame's all one piece. When it starts to rot, goodbye car. And of course, they're made thinner and cheaper. Unibody, it's one of the reasons they do it. Costs less to make them. They weigh less, they get better gas mileage. But really, 23 miles a gallon on the highway, this isn't that bad. And it won't rot away. Even if some of the body parts rot, the frame is still there. When the body parts rot in the unibody, the whole thing starts rotting. You could say goodbye car. But not really, you might say, how good is a $200 car gonna run? Well, let's find out. Hey, Mark, it's that go. Well, to begin with, this thing is about 100 times quieter than that brand new Fiat engine I filmed the other day. It may have all that mileage, but these V8 engines, they can run forever. Now, granted, it's a Ford, so the AC doesn't work anymore, but then again, this is Massachusetts. But the heater works. Puts out a lot of heat. Feels like a bonfire in one of these. We got a little noise here, though. Let's see if we can figure it out. Just realize it's a Ford, so let's jack it up. We'll see if the frame's rotten now. Doesn't appear to be bending. Now, it doesn't like the noise, but there's nothing physically worn. Here's what's happening. It's just an old car. And when you look in here, as you can see here when I zoom in, you can see the rubber bushings are kind of rotten. That's what happens. When these things age, bushings here, they're going to rot a little bit. It doesn't have any play, but as I said a million times when I was a young mechanic, I had grease fittings, you'd grease them. Now the rubber bushings on metal, as they get old, the rubber gets corroded and it will creak. You could spray a bunch of WD-40 on them all. I like that AT205 reseal because it rejuvenates rubber, but it's kind of hard to find. So you might try WD-40 and you'll find the noise will go away for quite some time. And when it comes back, just spray it again. And interestingly enough, the lower ball joint has been replaced and it's got a grease fitting. So the next time he changes oil, you can pull the wheel off and you can put some grease in off and that'll make the noise go away too. It doesn't have any play, so it's not dangerous. Now generally you gotta wait quite some time, but check it out. A little bit still, but starting to work its way in. And that particular noise might even be the sway bar. They've got bushings, you can unbolt them, put grease in and put them back on. There's nothing structurally wrong. Even the door. Hey, that tells you solid. Old car, bud? Hey, smooth. Even on these bumpy Rhode Island roads, as old as it is, this thing still rides pretty smooth. And when you step on the gas, hey, you hear that V8 engine? It may be old, but it's still moving. And one advantage of this baby is it's got nice clearance. A gigantic lump at the end of the street, it just flew over. It didn't do anything. Got enough clearance, got a decent suspension system. You don't have to worry about dragging the bottom of your car in those stupid speed bumps. So really, 200 bucks for a car that runs this good? Maybe you should do like The owner of this car did. Guy was looking at how to donate a car. He said, hey, I'll buy it. I'll fix it up and keep it going. There's nothing wrong with doing that if you pick the right vehicle that isn't rotten. I'm sure the fender's been whacked, but I mean, you can get it fixed and repainted if you really want to. You can just leave it the way it is. Over 20 miles a gallon on the highway, a smooth ride, safe for his young child. You can't beat that. Plus, you get cheap insurance on these things. It's an older car, and the insurance companies know they're safe. They have good safety records. New enough, it's got airbags on it. You can save a lot of money on insurance, too. Now, this old 2002, hey, it's still in decent shape. Runs good. Drives good. Turn the old key on. What does it have? 150,000 miles. Now, as far as I'm concerned, this baby's barely broken in. I got a customer with one that's got over 350,000 miles. Original owner, original transmission, original engine, original rear end differential. This is a solid, substantial vehicle. It's the rear wheel drive. It's not the all wheel drive. Most people don't need all wheel drive. It's a truck that's been turned into an SUV. Now, back in 2002, they weren't giving these things away. This thing was about $34,000 when it was brand new. A brand new one is about $53,800. So it's almost $20,000 more than this one. Yet, from my experience as a mechanic for the last 52 years, the quality has gone way down in the 19 years between this one and the new ones. The price may have gone up $20,000, but the quality's gone down. What's up with that? Now, as we can see here, this Tahoe was made by General Motors, and it was built in Arlington, Texas. Notice, though, it says truck assembly. Now, if you buy a 2020 Tahoe, it's still assembled in Arlington, Texas. But, this is a gigantic but, many of the parts come from Mexico, where one of their real quality problems with GM exists. So it's got a rear differential. There's the differential. A little bit greasy, but it's full of fluid, so who cares? While we're under here, you can see it's got a solid frame. Even though it's 19 years old, it's not rusted, it's nice and solid, and the spare tire heading under the back. The problem with many of the modern Tahoes, and also the Silverado pickups, is many of their rear end differential assemblies are made in Mexico, and they aren't making them all that well. If you've watched any of my past videos, you'd find out. I met the Southern mechanic, and he thought, why are these rear ends going out? These GM trucks. Well, he took the brakes and everything and the axles off, and he got a torque wrench, put it on the differential, and started pulling. And you're supposed to get a certain amount of pound-foot of torque on the wrench before the axle starts to turn. That's from the drag of the bearings being the correct tightness. He found that there was hardly any pressure was needed, less than 1 pound-foot of torque for it to start moving. Meaning, when they manufactured them, they were putting together too loose. So people were getting new trucks, and yes, of course it had a new differential in the back, but it had the equivalent almost 100,000 miles of wear because it was so loose. So they went out too early because of this. But not this one. Rear end and this one's made in the United States. It doesn't have those problems. This still has the original rear end. It still works perfectly fine. They're trying to cut corners, making things in Mexico. It saves them money, but notice they're not passing the savings on to you. The new one is almost $20,000 more than this one. Let's look at the evolution of the entire vehicle itself. They had other engines sometimes, but really the mainstay is a V8. And this one has the larger one, the 5.3 V8. These are heavy vehicles with the big V8. This one gets 13 miles a gallon in town and 17 on the highway. Yes, they're gas hogs, the big giant vehicles. But let's go to 2020. Okay, what's that? 18 years later? How they get fantastic gas mileage later? Well, not really. I got a customer with a 2020 Tahoe, and he gets 15 miles a gallon in town and 20 on the highway. Not all that difference when you consider 18 years later, all the advances in technology, not that much difference. Yet the price of the vehicle is $20,000 more. It really doesn't make that much sense. Of course, they're both really heavy vehicles. There's only so much you can do with heavy vehicles. They're never going to get great gas mileage. It just doesn't work that way. They weigh too much. They're pulling all their weight around. But with the new ones compared to the old ones, they just don't have the quality that the old ones had. I've seen air conditioning systems break on these things when they're 2 and 3 years old. This one, you can see the dirty air conditioner under there. It's still the original AC compressor. So in this case with the old one, you paid less, but you got more quality. Let's take the transmission. This baby's rear wheel drive. The transmission itself is a very basic 4-speed automatic transmission. Let's start it up and take it for a spin. Starts right up. The AC still is freezing cold. As we drive down the road, you can see it shifts smooth, big, quiet ride. We'll stop and take off, see how it goes. It's got decent acceleration, but the transmission still shifts smooth as silk, even with all this mileage. And you feel bumps here and there. It's not a car, it's a truck, but it's a well-built truck. You feel safe and solid. Go over these big bumps, yeah, you feel the bumps, but you don't lose any stability. It's a perfectly stable vehicle for driving it. Corners fine. You wouldn't think this thing had 150,000 miles on it. They were really well built back in 2002. And that AC, man, it's still nice and cold with all those original parts on it. It's got a nice interior. They've modernized it by putting their own Sirius XM on it instead of the old-fashioned one. But it's got rear AC controls, tons of room. As we go out and look in the back, lots of room. Leather seat has the back. You can put optional seats in the back if you want. Plenty of space for doing all kinds of things in one of these. And look, even the original wheels are still in good shape. They used to build them really well. Thoughtful luggage rack on the top to stick even more stuff. Inside the cavernous rear, space galore. That's what these things are about. When you compare this old one to the new one, yeah, this old one has a bigger engine and it has 285 horsepower, while the new plain Jane one, 355 horsepower. So the new one indeed has more power, but these things aren't race vehicles. That's not what they're about. And yeah, the new one goes 0 to 60 in 6.5 seconds. No speed burner. This thing does it in 8.7 seconds. Definitely slower, but like I say, these aren't race vehicles. So in the newer one, they have more power and speed, but as you gain power and speed, you lose gas mileage. So the gas mileage is only a couple, 3 miles a gallon better in a newer one than this one that was made 18 years ago. You'd think you get a lot better gas mileage, but no, they went for speed, not gas mileage. And if you want reliability, this has got that 4-speed automatic. These things are pretty much bulletproof if you do minimal maintenance on them. This still has the original ones, never been touched, still ships fine. The new ones use that 10-speed automatic that GM and Ford made in tandem. The engineers, whether they know it or not, and I'm assuming they know it, are being stonewalled by the law of diminishing returns. You keep adding more gears, the efficiency becomes less and less. A lot of the manufacturers now are sticking at 8 speeds. You get the better gas mileage, what it costs to manufacture them, how they last, the power that they have. They're saying that maybe 10 is overkill. I mean, you can certainly see the law of diminishing returns with the Tahoe. 18 years later, they only get a few miles per gallon better than this thing did. So the law of diminishing returns said, well, you get a tiny bit better gas mileage and you're getting more power, but, you know, they're still not going to get fantastic gas mileage, especially in the real world. Stop and go city driving all the time. City or suburbia, wherever you happen to live, and you're always going to get in the teens in these things. That's the best they can do, being this heavy and having an engine with that much power. So the law of diminishing returns kind of bites them in the rear end there. Now being a 2002, this has a reasonable amount of metal in it. Still got the metal valve cover gaskets, but if you look under there, you'll see the intake manifold itself in here, it's made out of plastic. Now this is the 2nd generation Tahoe. They are presently building the 5th generation Tahoes, and as you probably already guessed, as the generations go up, so does the usage of plastics and computer modules. Things that don't last as long, and when they break down, cause some really expensive repairs. Now this old one's held up well, and as you see here, can operate on gasoline or on ethanol all the way to E85. Now my customer here never used the E85. Texas is a gasoline state. I'd have to drive 20-something miles from downtown Houston to find one of these E85 stations. It was never all that popular. And of course realize that ethanol has like 20% less energy than gasoline. So you get about a 20% worse gas mileage. And this thing's a gas hog to begin with. You would get in the low teens if you ran this thing on ethanol in town. Granted, the ethanol, they run a little bit faster, but they also burn the fuel faster. One of the last things you want to do on one of these. Plus, it's very dependable when run with just gasoline. You start messing with higher levels of ethanol, the sensors in the system can break down. It creates problems that just normal gasoline that only has 10 to 15% ethanol in it isn't going to have. Now, as we shut the hood, you can see as old as this thing is, still looking shiny. And yes, people, that's metal. That's chrome on metal. Back in 2002 when they were making these babies, they built them solid. Look at this thing. People will often pass these things on because they're so well made. But the new ones, not so much. We got an F-150. It does have over 350,000 miles. It's running rich on one side. We're going to try to figure out why. Now, he bought it over 100,000 miles ago for only $3 grand, so he's getting his money's worth. But with 350,000 miles, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. So it's scan tool time. No, we can definitely feel it shaking, and when we put in gear, of course, it shakes a little bit more. You can feel it shaking. Intelligent diagnosis. It's an 03 F-150. So we'll go to diagnosis. Now we'll do a smart scan. It's older, so there's only so much it's going to do. Okay, we can see the PCM has a code, so we'll check that first. 2 rich, bank 2. We'll look at read the fault code. It is running rich on bank 2. We have the data stream for that, and we'll start it up and look at the data. Blue is good, other colors are bad, so let's start to look at it. Everything's been blue. I don't see any bad data yet. As we can see, the pulse width on bank 1 that's running fine is 0.004 to 005, and this is 004 to 003. So the computer is deliberately pulsing the number 2 bank less. It feels that the engine's running rich on that side, so it's giving it less fuel to compensate for it. And when we rev it up, you can see bank 1 stays steady, but bank 2 goes between 0.004 and 003. Keeps trying to compensate. Neither the sensor 1 or sensor 2, so you can't blame the oxygen sensors. They're just reporting to the computer that the bank 2 is running richer than bank 1, so it tries to lean it up. We check for injector faults. There's no error in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8. That can often be misleading for one reason. That's checking the internal electrical resistance. They can be electrically okay, but if the pintle, where it sprays into a cone shape, all fuel injectors are supposed to spray an inverted cone shape. If it's not spraying right and it's dribbling, the dribble doesn't burn correctly and it makes it run a little bit on the rich side. There's too many blobs of gasoline. So even though the injectors are working electronically, it doesn't mean that they're physically okay. Bank 1 that doesn't have the problem is adding 25% fuel long term, while bank 2 is subtracting 18% long term. So in this case, one side's running rich and the other side's running lean. The mass airflow sensor, because it would affect both equally, and one's running rich and one's lean, and this is 5.86 grams. That's okay. Short term fuel trim, you can see bank 1 2.9, sometimes as high as 5 minus. It's going up and down, where the short-term fuel trim on bank 2 keeps subtracting. It never goes to the positive. It's subtracting the whole time. It's really moving around. Now, I went into the General Electrical mod that had codes, and it has an interesting code. The battery voltage level is too low. So I tested the battery, and he says it's as old as the truck. It came with the truck 100,000 miles ago, but you can see the state of charge is 100%. The state of health is 52%. That makes it yellow. If you wanted to change it, you could definitely change it, but this is not going to make it run weird. And the charging system's fine too, so nothing wrong with that. Now my guess is, since it runs decent at higher speeds but idles like crap, it's got a problem with the fuel injection system, so I'm going to check it with my thermal imager. When I look on the right side, some of the exhaust is white hot, some of it is red, and some of it is green. That means it's not a problem that affects every cylinder. If it was every cylinder, they'd all be the same color. They'd all be white, red, or green, whatever. So let's look at the other side. Now that side is more continuous. They're all white. So the one side, they're relatively the same temperature-wise, but the other side is all over the place. And you saw when we looked at the short-term data, one side was running rich and one side was running lean. You can't get it running rich from a vacuum leak. Vacuum leaks, if they're sucking air, always make them run lean because you get too much air, not enough fuel. So it definitely leads me towards fuel injection problem. They're probably carboned up. So we'll get the ATS cleaner. Throw it in the gas tank, pour it all in. Now we're going to take it for a serious drive. Now, does cleaner always work? No, of course it doesn't always work, but it's the best thing to try rather than buying 8 expensive fuel injectors. Well, now we're going down the road. Let's see what it sounds like. Doesn't sound all that bad, and we just started. It was low on gas to begin with, a little under half a tank. So it's more concentrated. Normally you want to drive a couple hundred miles, but already I can feel it shake less, so I'm going to look at the data. Now the original code, which I didn't erase yet, it's got a stored code that it was running too rich. That was at a low speed. It tripped because the long-term fuel trim on bank 2 was minus 20, was subtracting 20% fuel. Well, as you can see, the long-term fuel is starting to go down. Now it's minus 18, minus 17 instead of minus 20. And even better, the short-term fuel trim only subtracting 1.6. Not much. And as we rev it up, it certainly sounds a lot better. So it's starting to erase less fuel, meaning it's running less rich. When a car runs rich, it's got to subtract fuel to try to make it even out. And it's already starting to do that. The interesting thing about this cleaner is, a lot of these cleaners, they work best on a hot soak. That's what it's doing now. They're sitting there hot and it's soaking in the injectors. What you want to do on these is don't just keep driving till you're out of fuel. Drive it a little, then let it sit, and drive it again, and let it sit, and then drive it again. And the hot soak will clean it as good as it can. Now, of course, cleaning doesn't always fix things. 300-something thousand miles, yeah, they could be what they're just flat starting to wear out, but it runs so good at high speeds, you can see they're putting out the volume. It's just that they're spitting incorrectly at lower speeds. So that's going to spit it and make the different temperatures exist on the exhaust manifold, because some will run rich, some will run lean. You saw how one side was actually running rich and the other was running lean. They're going opposite ways. The cleaner can get them all to spray exactly the same. That's something for a bottle of cleaner. Now this one is on its way. It's kind of a toy for him anyway. He's got lots of vehicles. It's kind of a knock-around truck, and if it runs as good as it's running now, gets a little bit better, he's going to be happy. You don't expect perfection with a truck that's got 300-something thousand miles on it, but it's got plenty get up and go, and it idles better. What the heck? It's definitely worth trying a good cleaner like this. Now this one actually works quite fast. I've watched it dissolve carbon in tests. It works pretty fast. You still though want to give it 100, 200 miles and do the hot soaking like I said, because when they're hot and they're soaking, that helps get rid of all the carbon buildup too, not just while they're running. So don't just put it in and then drive it 200 miles and fill it up. You want to have it sitting hot soaking for a while too. Then it's got a much better chance to pull all the carbon off. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.